Hello, my name is Roland Reyer. I'm a technical specialist for Maya at Autodesk Media Entertainment in Europe. In this presentation, I'd like to talk to you about the new features and improvements in Maya 2022 and its recently released update number 1. Like with every presentation, I'd like to group the new features and improvements into a number of topics. Like the general topic where everything belongs, that is not modeling and texturing and not animation and not rigging. And we do that in this presentation as well. Normally the section with the general topics is a little bit boring because the features there are not as visually interesting as the things in the visual effects, for example. But this year you will be surprised about some of the new features and enhancements that really are going to make your life easier and better with the new Maya. So let's have a look at what we got here. There's a new startup user experience, and we will talk about that in a moment. There's also a new interactive getting started screen, a new search functionality. The view cube is back if you like it. There's a number of people who have asked us to bring the view cube back. Then Python 3 is now the default in Maya 2022. You can still start Maya in the Python 2 mode, but Python 3 is now the default. You should migrate your scripts to Python 3. OpenColor.io version 2 is integrated, and there are security preferences that allow you to restrict scripts from running and also plugins from running. So what about this startup user experience? When you start up Maya, you normally see this splash screen, and there's a progress bar down here that shows you where we are in the startup procedure. But in the past, this progress bar wasn't very accurate, so it didn't tell you exactly how far we are. It was not a linear in terms of timing. So in Maya 2022, this progress bar now shows you what Maya is currently doing and also shows you the exact timing, so where in the whole startup process you are, and it shows you how long several plugins take to load. And in previous releases, I would have made the recommendation, for example, if Maya starts up too slow, you may want to turn off the Bifrost plugin because it takes very long to start and to load. But this is no longer true. Bifrost now loads in 5 seconds, so you have to look for another plugin that you want to turn off if it takes too long. So this splash screen has been improved. Maya also no longer steals the focus. So in the past it was so if you were writing an email or something like that, then Maya kept stealing the focus and you could not write or couldn't do anything else because Maya was in this startup process. That also doesn't happen anymore. And when you see the window, when the actual Maya main window appears, it is ready to start. So you don't have to wait any longer for plugins to load. Maya is ready to start from there. There's a new option to copy parts of the preferences. In the past, you had only the choice to copy all of the preferences or none. And now you can say, for example, I want to load the hotkeys that I had already, but I want Maya to create default shelves, which is always a good idea because otherwise you won't see if there are new improved icons on the new shelves. The output window is now optional. This output window was there since the very first release of Maya. It's a general window that simply echoes print commands from plugins and from internal processes. It's very interesting if you are a developer, but in most cases the users don't need it, and we turned it off, and you can if you still need it, you can turn it on in the Windows menu here. Under the Windows menu, the output window will turn this on. When you quit Maya, there's also some improvement happening. In the past, users were upset about this question here. Do you want to save the scene? When they knew exactly it's an empty scene. It's not interesting. I don't want to save it. So it was just a security measure from our developers who said, if we don't know exactly that the scene is empty, then we better ask the user. But this led to this, overly asking every time when I want to leave Maya, I'm being asked if I want to save an empty scene. This doesn't happen anymore. So the check for the emptiness of the scene has been changed and improved. And finally, when you quit Maya, it will close the window immediately. So the window is going to disappear and all the closing background processes, are pushed to the back so that you have access to your desktop and you can start doing whatever you want to do after that. So let's talk about this new Maya home screen, this welcome screen. When you open Maya 2022 for the first time, you will be surprised to see this window, this new welcome screen that greets you and lets you do certain things. There is, for example, a What's New section in here that immediately tells you what are the new features in the latest version. In the past, you had to go to the documentation to see what's new. That was basically exactly what you see here in this What's New screen. And then for new users, it's very interesting to have a Getting Started section where you find interactive tutorials that guide you through the first steps in Maya. And these tutorials are particularly interesting because it is now interactive tutorials in Maya directly. So the user is guided in Maya directly and does not have to have a browser window open and the Maya window on the other side. Then there is a window, a screen with learning content. So the different websites where you simply find Maya learning tutorials. And last but not least, there's a community here, community access here where you can go to the various communities to download stuff and to discuss with other users of the software about certain things. And if all of that is not interesting for you, you can start with something like this here. That's the recent files scene. It simply offers you to load one of the files that you had recently opened. And if that's not interesting, you can still go to Maya by this blue button here. And in Maya, you can access this home screen, as we call it, in the Windows menu here by the Home or Alt Home hotkey, and also by this little new house icon in the upper left corner of the Maya window. So that's just for the start. You haven't done anything in Maya, just launch it, and there's already so many new things and so many improvements. Let's talk about a moment about this interactive Getting Started. So this Getting Started tutorial, as I said, runs inside Maya. So the Maya window is also where the tutorial runs, where all the instructions happen. And this is done by so-called state machines. So in the node editor, you will find these stage nodes that run Python commands and go step by step through the tutorial. And these Python commands would then create these little windows here, these overlay windows that tell the user what's going to happen in this step of the tutorial, and also these bubbles that show where you want to click or which part you want to modify of your scene. And then the check whether the user has done that or not can be done with the Python commands. And there are templates available, so you don't have to do everything from scratch. There are templates available that lets you pick the framework of the scripts, so it's much easier for you to set up such a tutorial. There are some tutorials already done that are around these robots here, these Maya bots, and this rig, of course, is also available for the users if you want that. And then the search. Search is such a thing where everybody thought, oh, come on, a search can't be that difficult. But when you look at what our engineers have done here, it's really interesting. It's not a very simple search. So at the beginning, we had a search function in the help menu, and we're searching just for a specific keyword for the menus, like in which menu do I find this specific function. A search is better because, or this search here is better because it also searches for synonyms. So if you, for example, search for the term box, it will offer you the polygon cube because that is a box, obviously. And so you don't have to know the exact term that is stated in the menus. You can use something a little bit closer. Then you can also search for MEL and Python commands, which is super helpful. And of course also for objects in your scene. I mean, that was possible in the past already, but all these three are now bundled together in this one search input that appears at the mouse position on your screen whenever you type Control F for find. You can, when you have found some of these functions, directly go into the menu. You can engage them from there, so you don't have to go into the menu where this function is. So you can engage it from wherever you are. Also, the recent commands are repeated there in this window. So when you start using it, after a while, you populate it with the recently found functions. You can have tags there, and you can also have shortcuts. Like if you type CO space BR, that could be the content browser, for example, and that will be offered, of course. And you can filter that by tags. If you say, for example, I'm just looking for animation features here, you can make the list much smaller and more compact. So that is the search. I really recommend to start with it. One way would be, for example, if you turn off all the user interface, including the pull-down menus, and try to use Maya just with that search function, you will be surprised how well that works and how fast it is also. So let's go over to the modeling section of my What's New topic list. So here we have a new Sweep Mesh plugin feature. Sweep Mesh is some sort of an extrude. We're going to have a look at it in a live session with Maya in a moment. So the Sweep Mesh makes all kinds of extrude work much easier now. We have a new Gain Vertex Count plugin. So when you model in polygons, you can turn on the vertex and face and edge count here in the upper left corner. And there's a new plugin that modifies this display depending on the game engine that you are working with. So here, for example, when you use Unity, there's a different way to calculate the surface normals, for example, and the edges, etc., in the representation of the Unity engine. Then there is an improved vertex color display. So when you draw vertex colors, you want to isolate just the red component, green component, or blue component, because it's not about the colors, it's about the data. And sometimes I would just want to see where is there a red component or a green component to make sure that I see which components I included with these colors. There are new features in the UV editor, specifically an input field for moving the UVs. So you can select a bunch of UVs and then modify the U or the V coordinate, and all of the UVs will be modified in the same way. And also there's a UV display here in the lower left corner so that you can see the coordinates directly from there. So let's have a look at this Sweep Mesh plugin. So here I've started Maya, and to show you this new way of extruding things, I'm going to simply create an S-curve here on the grid like this, and maybe use some of these CVs here to make the whole thing a little bit more three-dimensional. Okay, back to object mode. And the next step for an extrusion would be to create a profile, right? And even if it's only a circle, you need a profile. But this is good here in the Sweep Mesh plugin. It allows you to create an extrude with a ready-made profile. So there is a number of profiles already there that you can use right away. Let me turn on wireframe unshaded So you see what we have here. It's a simple tube, and I can change the number of sides that it has. I can even turn it into a star shape with an inner radius and an outer radius. Right, so the number of sides can still be modified. Let's stay with the circle here. And then, for example, I can scale the profile with this value here. I have a tapering value, so I can scale it down on one end, for example. So all of that is easy and nice to handle in the attribute editor. So I don't have to, create it once and then hunt for the construction history node. This construction history node will be displayed immediately. So here I switch the profile to the rectangular profile, where I can adjust the height and the width separately. Then we have this corner radius that I can adjust even with the number of segments that we have on the corners. And of course also, a corner depth that can be negative. So from +1 to -1. You see that this one is twisting along the curve a little bit, and that's why we have this twist value here to twist it or to straighten it up a little bit if that happens along the curve. Generally, when you have like rectangular curves, that will work very well for image frames or any kind of architecture work. So that's a very cool example here with these. You can have a line as a profile for simple card style extrusions, or a partial cube, which is just an arc, and you can specify the angle and the number of segments, so that you don't have to, create a tube and then delete all of it. There's even a wavy profile that you can specify with a number of cycles, number of segments, and then the amplitude and the offset for the whole thing. So very cool. All of these are animatable, of course, as well. So let's have a look at this in action. So I'm loading a bigger model here. This is our frog character, that frog warrior character that we are using to present animation and rigging tasks. So for example, at the lance here, there is this rope structure here, and there's part of it is missing. So we have these two NURBS curves here, and I can pick them both and create a sweep mesh. There's the option actually to make one construction history node or two construction history nodes for each curve. So one node will be fine for me, as they have both the same properties. And then I would scale it down to get some sort of a rope. And then you see here we need to change the resolution by a bit, because this is too low resolution. And I do that down here in the construction history node, the sweep mesh creator, by improving simply this precision slider to something like 80, 85 or 90, maybe even a bit thinner, the whole thing. And here we have our rope, so it's that easy. We can then move over to the belt, for example, of the character. So here are two belt curves. These are actually leather straps that I want to include with the belt. So it's very simple. Again, make a sweep mesh curve and then change the profile like so. Maybe I'll have a rectangular profile. Oops. So maybe I'll have a rectangular profile like this, and as I said, I can adjust the width and the height separately, like so. So these are leather straps for me. And finally, look at this one here. We have a rounded section here at this large belt part, and I want the same thing here on top. So what I can do here is to pick edges and just double click on this edge to select the whole edge loop around the belt. And then under modify, I can convert this to a curve. So now I have a NURBS curve that is exactly the same as these polygon edges. And with this NURBS curve selected, I'll create a sweep mesh. And here we have a tube that is simply scaled down. There is a little problem here because at the moment this new curve is in the center of this sweep mesh. So let me turn on the X-ray here and select the curve. So here you see the curve is in the middle of this thing. And that's why this sweep mesh creator has a section called alignment. I can align this thing vertically so that the curve sits at the bottom of my rounded element. Here you see. And then turn off the X-ray again and maybe scale it down a little bit more, like so. And here we go. So that was really easy to create that. And finally, we have these curves here for these maces, and let's create some sort of a rope. So what I can do actually is to create such a tube object, and then under distribution, I can make it so that instead of one tube, I have 5 tubes or 7 tubes if I like. And then I can adjust the overall profile like so. And since this is no rope, I'm going to twist the whole thing strongly and increase the resolution. Now look, when I bump this up here, this looks very much like a rope. And because it doesn't fit properly at the ends here, so here we have a problem and here we have a problem, I can use the taper curve here, make it larger, and use this one here. So I'm scaling it down. Look over here, I'm scaling it down on the one side, but then immediately after that, I'll scale it up again so that it has a certain thickness, and the same at the end. So scale it down and immediately scale it up again. So now it fits into these ends. This is beautiful, and actually I should have done that for the other curve as well. But here's a workaround. I can save all of these settings here in the Sweep Mesh Creator node. So save a new Sweep Mesh Creator node. This is number 4 here, but that exists already. So it wants me, do you want to override that? Yeah, why not? Let's override it. Then pick the other curve, create a sweep mesh, and pick this preset here, the number 4 again, and replace all the settings. And here we go. So this is the second rope, has the same setting as the first one. You may have noticed that here we see the NURBS curves all the time. So these NURBS curves somehow display on top of everything. They are not hidden by the geometry. And this is a new setting, a display setting for NURBS curves. So here for the NURBS curve, under Object Display, you will find this always draw on top. This is a specific setting for riggers who want their control objects, their control curves usually, on top of everything else, so they are not hidden by other objects. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation here. This was my sweep mesh presentation, and these were the new features in the modeling. Let's jump over. Oh, there's another one that I forgot to mention. There's a new extrude function that fixes this problem with the old extrude, that it was creating these spikes to the left and the right in certain situations only, but this is now fixed. Okay, I hope we have it all now. So let's go over to rigging. That's very interesting topic with super cool features. So let's start with the Solidify deformer, and it's shown here. So the goal is actually to have these spikes here, to solidify them, to make them harder. It's very hard to see in this example here, and that's why I made my own example. So let's load this. So for me, the perfect example is the Stegosaurus. You know, this dinosaur with these bone plates on the back, as a defense measure, of course. Imagine the Stegosaurus, bends its tail or so, and then the bone plates, of course, would be a solid thing that is attached to the back. Now build something here that is supposed to be my Stegosaurus tail. Let me select this thing and hide it for a moment. So this is my Stegosaurus tail, and I have a NURBS curve here in the middle, And when I move that around, you see that the bone plates are not rigid at all. They are deformed together with the wire deformer, or the wire deformer here that bends the tail. And even though the curve keeps its length, so it does not shrink anything, the bone plates are collapsing completely. So this is not working well. So in order to use the solidify deformer, what we do here is to pick all the facets that are supposed to become rigid. So I'm going to pick all of these here, all of the bone plates, right? Make sure that you just select these and then just go to the deform menu and choose solidify. That's it. Let's go back to the curve, pick the vertex at the end and move it, and wow, can you see that? How all of these bone plates stay rigid and keep their shape. I can even prove it here. Here's the solidify deformer, and under deformer attributes there's the envelope. When I turn it down and remove the influence of the solidify deformer, you see this is the before and this is the after. So it keeps the shape of all of these bone plates, which I find really cool. So it works really, really well in both directions and in a very natural way. So if you want to achieve these results with your own deformers, that's quite some work here. This works really well. Just a word of caution, when you do that, make sure that your bone plates or the stuff that you want to keep rigid, it needs some subdivisions, at least 2 subdivisions, and then the algorithm has a chance to get these things more rigid. But it does not work if there are no subdivisions, or it does not work very well. So with these bone plates with 3 subdivisions works perfectly. Okay, so that was the first one. The next one here will be component tags, which is also something for riggers. So for component tags, I was looking for an example for these component tags, and I found something really, really simple. So what we have here is a high resolution polygon plane and a cluster handle. And all of these, the complete polygon is attached to the cluster handle. So when I move the cluster handle around, no wonder the whole polygon plane moves 100%. Now all deformers in Maya 2022 now have these deformer attributes with these so-called component tags. And this one here for the cluster tells that it's using all of the vertices of the polygon plane. Now you know in the deform menu we have this edit membership tool where you can remove vertices from that cluster or add other vertices to that cluster, but it's a very tedious work because you have to do it for every deformer, and sometimes move them back and forth between the deformers. And it would be much easier if we could name these memberships, and that is exactly what component tags are. So let me show you how that works. I'm gonna select vertices from this polygon plane with the selection brush tool, and I draw a large A on top of that. So here are my vertices. In the attribute editor, you don't see the object anymore because it doesn't update with the brush tool for performance reasons. So I hit Control A 2 times and here we go. And under component tags, there is a number of component tags already there for this polygon plane shape. These are the borders and the whole rim around the thing. I want to create a new one, and I'm going to call it tag A because that's the big A. And then I will go back to the cluster handle and I'm going to tell it, you don't want to influence all of the vertices, but just the tag A vertices. And now when I move this cluster around, ta-ta, you see the tag A vertices moving. Okay, that's cool, but not cool enough. So let's move it back and create another component tag with the vertices with this tool here. Let's deselect everything and draw another letter. Let's say a large B, and then Control A, add a new component tag, and I call this one here tag B. Good. Let's go to the cluster handle now and tell it to influence tag B vertices. And you see, tag B. Cool. So I can switch between the two tags. Very cool. Not cool enough. I can say, let's use tag A and tag B. Is that possible? So add the influences together. Yes, that's totally possible. So here we see tag A plus tag B. I can also use tag A minus tag B. Totally possible. And there's even a tag A exclusive tag B. That's this sign here. Ta-ta. So here we see all of the vertices that are in both tag groups. And then you can group the whole thing with brackets and make expressions actually for these component tags. So it's much easier now to work with components because you can assign groups to the deformers and keep them and use them for other deformers as well. That's very easy. So let's use a tag A. Damn it. So let's use a tag A here and see what else we have. We have fall-offs here. If I right click into this one here, I can assign a number of fall-offs. Let's just use the very first one here, a primitive fall-off. And a primitive fall-off is this object here. Let me scale it up actually, and we need to go into world space. So this is what a primitive fall-off is. It gives you some sort of a sphere, and inside this sphere the cluster has its deformation. And the cluster is completely independent from the sphere. So I can move the cluster around, but only the vertices driven by this fall-off here show this deformation. There's even another shape, a plane shape. Between these two planes we have the deformation and a nice S-curve as defined here between the two. So I can set the distance between the two shapes and even make a new point here in this curve, in this S-curve, to define the fall off of the whole thing. Okay, that invites for playing, right? So let's play around with an older file. I have an old file here with the Witcher that we used from 2016 on to show this whole example. And this Witcher has some blend shapes here. For example, here for the eyebrows. For the eyebrows, I could show eyebrow left and eyebrow right. So frowning would be something, or we have this whole thing here for the mouth, the snarl left and right. And when I look at that, actually, I don't have to select it from here. I can select it from here. So when I look at the blend shape, there are suddenly these deformer attributes and there is component tags there. The component tags are always the 100% in the old files, but it has added the component tags to all of the deformers here. So I can, of course, also right click and add a primitive deformer fall off. So suddenly my deformation is gone here. And there is a primitive fall off down here at the center of the, at the origin of the coordinate system. So when I move that up here, let's go a little bit closer, right, and move it down a little bit. So here you see the influence of this deformer. And of course I can make it bigger, but actually it's the best influence when I just have a very small influence region and you can do things like that. That's a very, this fluent movement of this deformer now is really hard to achieve with blend shapes only. So these deformer fall-offs are very good, have a very nice look for the object. Okay, so that was the deformer fall-offs. And the component tags are shown in this image here. The fall-offs are shown in this image here. There's something where I don't have an image here, and that's the new morph deformer. And also this one also caused me headaches because I didn't have an idea how to show this thing. So I built this scene here with 3 different objects, and we are playing now with blend shapes. So you know that for blend shapes you would simply take the target first and then the base object, or the targets first and then the base object. So in this case I'm just taking this one target with the open mouth, and then as a base object this complete character that is skinned already. And the skinning is not a problem, but it's a complete character. It has a different number of vertices. So what happens when I use the blend shape? Of course, I'm getting an error message. You can't do blend shape here because they do have different topologies. And if I tell the blend shape to ignore the topology, apply, then I get what I wanted. So here we have a blend shape, but look, when I apply it, it's like, no, that's not working. So let's undo that 2 times until we see undo blend shape callback here, and do the blend shape between these 2. So this one and this one here, even with check topology on, that works nice because this has the same number as this one here. And here we have the blend shape node, and now I can blend shape this thing and it works fine. Okay, so I leave the mouth open for the next stage here. I can also close it. So for the next stage, how do I transfer this one over to this here? Now it's a similar process like blend shape, but with only one target. And also the selection order is different. So you first select the main object and then the target object, and then you go deform, morph deformer. And there is a warning that 10,000 vertices have not been matched, but the ones that count, these have been matched. And now when I go into the blend shape of this guy here and use this open mouth blend shape, you see that my big character, my full body character, takes this blend shape. It's just the one step from the many blend shapes onto the full body character that this one here does. And it works on the graphics card, so the GPU calculates these deformations, and that's why it is also very fast. Just be aware, because the character was already skinned, this one here happens. So the head stays in place because my deformations for this full body are in the wrong order. So I have to go here into this window for the construction history and middle mouse button drag and drop the morph underneath the skin cluster. So you read it from the bottom here. First comes the morph and then the skin cluster, and then this whole thing works here correctly. Okay, so that was an example for the morph deformer. I hope you understand what it's good for. So it solves a particular problem with the blend shapes. Always draw on top. You've seen that already. That's the thing with the NURBS curves that are always visible. And the skin binding with the proximity wrap is a new option here in the skin binding options that allow you to use proximity wrap for binding characters, which will make it easier to swap out the skin after the fact, because proximity wrap allows this. Wow. So let's go over to the animation part of it and have a look what the new features are here. So for animation, for the animators, we have the new time slider bookmarks created in Maya 2020 already. And now it's improved a little bit so that you can interactively change these bookmarks on the timeline directly. We will have a look at that in a moment. There's a new ghosting editor that I'm a big fan of. It allows you, or ghosting is much easier than before. So in the past, I always had problems with ghosting. And this one here is really very, very simple. And there are some graph editor improvements that I will also show. There is cached playback now for simulations and dynamics. cached playback for the time editor. There are additive clips in the time editor. And for Human IK, you see this example here for the neck motion reduction. So this one is wrong here. You see the head tilts too much around one single joint. And when you do this head motion reduction, the rotation is distributed over a number of joints and looks much more natural. So let's go back to the time slider improvements. And for that, I'm going to load a little example here. This is Eric. And I'm using Eric here as an example. This is simply a character from the built-in content browser. So here on the shelf, you will find a new icon for the content browser to, import ready-made characters, ready-made skeletons, and ready-made motion capture examples to play with. And for that, we also need an animation setup here, so that I have my graph editor and my time editor over here, and the timeline, of course. And you know that the timeline is now scalable in case you have audio clips attached to the timeline. You would see the waveform much better here when it's bigger. Now, as I said, you can now interactively place these clips here. Change the camera. You can now interactively place these clips here by holding the control key. Simply hold the control key and then you can pick up the clip and move it around. Or when you go close to the ends, you can also change the end of the clips so that you don't have to go into this time slider bookmark manager, right? Which is not very nice to handle. So it's much better. It should be 71 here. Yeah, that's much better. So typing in numbers is fine, and also notice you have the pull down menu for unfortunately it leaves the recorded area here. So you have the pull down menu for the timeline over here. So here you can see it, where the time slider bookmarks sub menu is, you can tear it off, right, and place it somewhere, and you can learn the hotkeys directly from here. But you can also, right click on the bookmark itself to get a different type of menu. It's not the same as this one here. It also doesn't show the hotkeys. So I recommend to tear this off to use this one here. You see there are hotkeys. And for example, when we look at this one here, so here, for example, in this region of the animation, you see there are some hiccups in the motion capture. So what we want to do here is now to frame this bookmark, and there are hotkeys to go to the next bookmark, for example, or to the previous bookmark, for example. You see me here switch around for the next and previous bookmark. The problem is, if you want to switch previous and again the previous bookmark, then the playhead is in the wrong position. It should be placed over here, and then I can go to the previous again. And then the playhead again is in the wrong position. It should be here. So this needs to be fixed in the next version so that you can, juggle through these bookmarks much better. So now let's have a look at these hiccups here. So we're going to go to the graph editor, and I will pick this bone here because I put this problem in there, so I know exactly where it is. I'm going to select these keyframes, hit the frame key. So with my mouse in the graph editor, the F key applies to the graph, and here the F key would apply to anything that is selected in the camera. So all of these editors have their own hotkeys. I can hold the Alt and the Shift key and right mouse button to, zoom in this direction only to make it a little bit smaller. And you see, I just pick these keyframes and move them to create some sort of a problem. Now, here's how you fix that. Under curves in the graph editor, you will find the peak removal filter, which has a cool preview. Of course, you could apply it and then hit undo if you don't like the result, but this preview is much cooler. You can, see what's going to happen, how it removes the peaks here. and then simply say, yeah, that's fine for me, so apply and close. And you can turn it off. So let's try it with another one, with another function here. Let me zoom out a little bit further and, pick some of these keyframes here and use the other function, the smooth filter, the Gaussian smooth filter, and I missed it, I believe. And there's a preview as well. Look here, and you can check what these look like in the different using the function or not using the function. So I can preview it and then look at it, and I think, no, I don't like it. It becomes too smooth, so I better just close it without applying the function. That's a new function in the graph editor. There are other new functions like new default tangents. When you create new keyframes, allow you to set default tangents, so your work becomes much easier. Oh yeah, and last but not least, let me collapse the graph editor again. Last but not least, there is this brand new ghosting editor. And this ghosting editor, I really love it because it has become so much easier to create ghosts. So I pick the object, click on create ghost from selection, and here you have it, right? For me, it was very frustrating at the beginning when I started with these ghosts because it didn't show anything. The problem was that I had the playback cache turned off. You always see this blue line appear down here. When I turn this on, you see a blue line appear, bam, and suddenly my ghosts are back. Why is that? So for deformed objects like this character, because it's a skinned object, you need to have the playback cache, because each one of these ghosts here is a complete deformed character, and it has to be in memory in order to get a proper performance. So these are simply displayed from memory because they are in memory already because of the playback cache. And that's why when you turn off the playback cache, you don't see them. Next problem is when you hit 3 on one of these characters, suddenly, the playback, suddenly the ghosts disappear, and that is because in the settings, so when I call the general preferences and look at the cached playback, this little check mark here is off by default. It's the cache smooth meshes. So currently this geometry here is not cached. When I turn it on, then you see down here in the timeline, you see the cache is building up, and now suddenly these ghosts are showing up. But this is a really slow process. It takes very long for a whole long timeline to calculate these smooth meshes, because every smooth mesh has 16 times the number of polygons. And that's why it is so slow. So that's why we turn this off. And that's why you don't see the ghosts when you have the smooth mesh preview on. So I hit the 1 key again, and you see the building up the cache is so much faster. And now you can see these ghosts again. Really nice and very smart and so easy to set up. So for me, it's fantastic how easy that has become to set up these ghosts. Okay, and if you don't like them anymore, unghost all, and that's it. Cool. So let's go back to our presentation here. No, that's not the right window. I wanted to use this one here. Let's go back. And after animation, we have Bifrost, that's special effects. So in Bifrost, we have a different release schedule. So during the time of Maya 2020, we released Bifrost 2.2 already. And then came Maya 2022 and worked with this Bifrost 2.2 also. And the news here were a new filter particles functionality where you can filter particles by size and lifespan and age and whatever functionality you have with a particle to do things like, for example, a fireworks can be done with this functionality. Then we have new ready-made example graphs that you can import to your scene and simply apply to any kind of geometry. We have this new refine arrow functionality. So here down here on the lower right in this image, you see on the left, this image is the simulation, so which runs at a certain resolution. If you bump up the resolution, you have longer simulation times, which can exceed the render times by a lot. So this refine arrow after simulation is a function that kind of sharpens these volumes and develops more details in the whole thing. Very cool. It's much faster than calculating these at a higher resolution. And in the meantime, there's already released a Bifrost 2.3 version because of these different release schedules of Bifrost and Maya. And now you can vary the properties of a volume of matter with a field. So imagine you had a turbulence field in the sandcastle, for example, and this turbulent field defines the stickiness and the wetness of the sand. So when you start your simulation, the sand breaks apart, in a non-uniform way. There's a new way of finding unknown nodes in graphs. So when you load a scene, for example, and there's a compound in that graph that Bifrost doesn't know, it will now highlight these in red and keep all these connections so that you can fix the whole thing. And we'll even save it with these unresolved unknown nodes. So next time you open it, when you have loaded and installed these compounds, it will show these nodes properly connected. And then we have a new feature which is hard to understand, a slider feature for the Bifrost graph. So in the past you always had to type in numbers, you could not use a slider. But that has to do with how this whole graph is made. It will be compiled as soon as you run it, and all the values that you see there are compiled into that program. And the news is now that when you use a slider, it will leave out these values and allow you to manipulate them interactively. So that is a connection to the outside of the program, so to say. And the performance, of course, is very good with these sliders, which is a very nice enhancement here, I would say. There's other things, the plugin loads faster, the particles collide faster. There are again new sample graphs, and there are scatter pack improvements. So a lot new stuff in Bifrost 2.3. And then there's something that I couldn't try for myself. That's Create VR for Maya. You can download a plugin for Maya that allows you to use Maya with your Oculus Rift glasses or your HTC Vive to use virtual reality to model and to modify your objects. That's a really cool way. I've looked at the videos and I'm really jealous. I want one of these Oculus Rifts to play around with it and to try it out. Check it out. If you have a Maya license, this is a free download for you, and you can use virtual reality for modeling. USD develops faster than I can build any demos. So the last time I touched these demos, we were still in the version 0.10, and now we already have 0.12. If you just Google for Maya and USD, you will find the GitHub link at the very top of the list where you can download the latest plugin. Things that have not changed so far is this USD layer editor for Maya. In Maya, you will have real USD objects, so you can author your scene with layers directly from within Maya and set values and control values directly from within Maya. And of course, also import and export sceneries directly in Maya. As I said, it develops really fast, and I don't have a chance to catch up. Check it out on GitHub, it's when you are working on a production pipeline, on a complex production pipeline, USD is definitely the way to go, which we also see in the next slide here when we go to Arnold, because Arnold already gets USD enhancements. Arnold was already ready to render USD scenes as stand-in objects, but will now render complete USD scenes from the text input. There have been in Arnold 6.2, there have been improvements in the performance and memory usage, as well as in the GPU rendering. There's a faster render using the progressive rendering, and yeah, Toon Shader has been optimized. So check this out. There's a new version of Arnold coming. I cannot announce it, so you have to wait a little bit longer, but there are interesting new things coming. So what have we seen so far? I demonstrated at least, or talked a lot about the new startup experience in Maya and the new welcoming screen that we have here. I've shown you the new Sweep Mesh plugin and the Solidify deformer, as well as the component tags for the rigging artists. The component tags make use of these new fall-off objects that can also be used with other deformers in Maya. Then we're looking at the morph deformer and the timeline bookmarks that can now be used with the control key to move around interactively. Then we had a look at the graph editor filters, the peak removal filter and the Gaussian smooth filter, and then the ghosting editor that I'm a big fan of. USD, we didn't talk too long about it, but as I said, that's developing too fast. I really can't build new stuff for that. Create VR, really use it or play around with it is really interesting new development. Then Bifrost 2.3 has come out recently. Arnold 4.2 is the actual M2A plugin for Maya. And all of that in a 1 hour presentation. Yeah, oh yeah, really, it's only 3 minutes to the full hour. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. My name is Roland Reyer. If you have any questions about this presentation, don't be afraid to mail me directly. The name is roland.reyer, R-E-Y-E-R, @autodesk.com. If you have any questions about Maya, feel free to contact me and I can help you via mail. Thank you very much.